He was the largest aircraft carrier the world had ever seen, a colossal beast of 71,000 tons, protected by an escort of experienced destroyers and shrouded in absolute secrecy. Almost no one in Japan knew of her existence. The sailors aboard were still finishing installations as she sailed. Her name? Shinano. Born from the hull of a battleship from the dreaded Yamato-class, she was hastily converted into a floating superweapon, a last gasp of an empire on the brink of collapse. Her destiny was to become the symbol of Japan's naval resurgence, but before completing her first mission, she vanished. Sunk not by planes, not by massive bombings, but by a single American submarine. And the most astonishing part? No one believed it when the commander returned and reported the feat. Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just a war story. It's a lesson about redemption, courage, and how self-trust can change the course of history. You'll see how a discredited man sank the pride of an empire and still had to prove he was telling the truth. As Japan tried to reorganize its forces after the Midway massacre, the High Command decided to go all in, transform the incomplete hull of a battleship into an immense aircraft carrier. The Shinano was a luxury makeshift, 3 times the size of a common ship, designed to carry more than 160 aircraft, plus suicide weapons like the Oka rockets and Shinyo explosive boats. She wasn't ready. Watertight doors, fire containment systems, valves, ducts, they were all missing. But the generals decided she had to set sail, now. When an American reconnaissance plane flew over the shipyard and photographed the newly commissioned monster, fear spread in Tokyo. In a panic, they gave the order, move the Shinano immediately to Kure, 300 miles away, to complete the adjustments safely. On the other side of the ocean, a man waited. Silent, focused, pressured by his own mistakes. Captain Joseph Enright of the USS Archerfish. American, born in North Dakota, Enright was a Navy veteran, but a veteran marked by failures. A year earlier, he had the chance to attack an aircraft carrier. He didn't act. He missed the moment. He doubted himself. After that, he surrendered command and plunged into silence. He carried on his shoulders the shame of someone who wasted a unique opportunity. But now, in November 1944, he was back at sea, back in command. A new mission, a new chance. Aboard the Archerfish, he sailed the dangerous waters south of Tokyo Bay. His objective was clear: patrol, observe, and if possible, attack. But he knew his reputation was still at stake. The crew respected him, but doubt still lingered. It was now or never. There would be no third chance. Meanwhile, the Shinano departed under escort from 3 experienced destroyers. Inside her, more than 2,000 men, including engineers, electricians, and civilian workers still finishing parts of the vessel. It was a forced voyage. The Shinano's captain Toshio Abe had protested. He said the ship wasn't ready, that she couldn't sail. But he was ignored. The order was absolute. And now, on that November late afternoon, the largest warship in Japanese history glided across the ocean, carrying more problems than protection. And it is in this scenario that the story begins to intersect. On one side, a floating monster born of haste and desperation. On the other, a discreet submarine commanded by a man thirsting for redemption. 2 worlds about to collide in a duel no one could ever have imagined possible. And then, as the sun disappeared on the horizon, something appeared in the Archerfish's periscope sight. An immense shadow, bigger than anything that crew had ever seen. Enright grabbed the binoculars. His eyes widened. That wasn't an oiler. It was something much, much bigger. But what to do when you have a unique chance and know you might be wrong? Enright would have to decide quickly, and any hesitation could sink more than a ship. It could sink his last chance to prove his worth. Night fell like a veil over the Pacific, but for Captain Joseph Enright, the darkness didn't mean invisibility. On the contrary, it was where the game began. On the Archerfish's radar, at 8:50 p.m. on November 28, 1944, a signal appeared to the northeast. Something large, slow, but alive. The crew thought it was a cargo convoy, maybe a tanker escorted by destroyers, but Enright knew that was different. The shadow was too long, too tall, with an almost absurd presence for that region. He went up to the deck, pointed the binoculars at the horizon, and saw a giant, illuminated by the faint moonlight, a vessel like nothing he'd seen before. The radar confirmed the contact was real, but the decision to keep it on screen implied enormous risk. By using the radar repeatedly, the Archerfish also exposed itself. It was like shouting in the dark, hoping the enemy wouldn't hear. The crew looked at Enright in silence. He knew what everyone was thinking. Turn off the radar, avoid drawing attention, but he did the opposite. He ordered to maintain tracking. This was his chance, and he wouldn't let it slip. Let's keep contact, whatever it costs. On the Shinano, Captain Abe received alerts from the operators, unknown radar pulses. Someone was watching them, a submarine perhaps, but he chuckled discreetly. A single submarine wasn't a real threat to a colossus like that. The armor was thick, the compartments extensive. An isolated attack wouldn't suffice. Only a coordinated group, a submarine pack, would have a chance. So he kept the course, kept the speed, and unknowingly put his ship on the razor's edge. The Archerfish wasn't fast. Submerged, she was slow. On the surface, her maximum speed was 18 knots. The Shinano, even with incomplete engines, could reach 20. That meant the only way to maintain contact was to keep sailing exposed, on the surface, under the risk of enemy guns. It was a tense race. Enright sweated, his hands firm on the cold metal of the deck. Everything was at stake. At 10:45 p.m., the escorting destroyer Isokadze spotted the submarine's silhouette in the distance and, ignoring formation orders, tried to initiate an attack, an instinctive, aggressive, and wrong move. Captain Abe stopped it immediately. That could be a trap, a decoy to draw away protection from the main vessel. Abe then ordered a sharp course change, immediate south. If it was an ambush, he wouldn't fall for it. On the Archerfish, the course change hit like a punch to the gut. The radar lost contact. The silhouette vanished from sight. Enright looked to the skies, then at the map. If the vessel was really an aircraft carrier, where would it go? What would be its objective? He recalled the navigation pattern observed before the change, a course of 210 degrees southwest. If it was a momentary deviation, she would return. If not, everything would have been in vain. That's when he made one of the riskiest decisions of his career. Maintain the original course, hoping to rediscover the enemy, betting against the invisible. A risk as great as firing torpedoes in the dark. Keep the bow. They'll come back. I know they will. Hours passed. Silence took over the submarine's interior. The crew didn't dare question, but in everyone's eyes, the doubt was clear. Enright kept his composure, but felt the weight of the decision. It was like chasing a ghost, a giant ghost. On the Shinano, problems piled up. One of the propeller shafts began to overheat, forcing a speed reduction. And then, at 11:40 p.m., Captain Abe, believing they had shaken the enemy, resumed the original course, southwest. A small detail, a tactical correction, but it was enough to seal the fate of everyone aboard. In the dark, south of the route, the Archerfish picked up the signal again. Radar reactivated. The contact was back, exactly on the course where Enright had bet everything. Aboard the submarine, restrained smiles appeared among the operators. Their captain's intuition had beaten the sea's silence. Contact reacquired, sir. The beast is back. With the target back in sight, the hunt entered the final phase. But how to prepare an attack against something so immense and survive to tell the tale? Enright needed to decide where to hit and how many torpedoes would be enough to bring down a giant.
The sea was calm, but inside the Archerfish, every second was mounting pressure on Captain Joseph Enright's shoulders. Contact had been re-established, but tracking such a fast ship was a race against the clock. The distance between the submarine and the Shinano fluctuated, sometimes closing, sometimes stretching until it nearly vanished. Enright's only real advantage was the enemy's navigation pattern. The Shinano followed a predictable course, even trying to seem erratic with zigzag maneuvers, and it was in that detail that Enright staked his chance. The radar showed the gigantic ship returning to the same line as before. Enright gripped the map firmly and whispered to himself, "He's coming straight at us." At 3:56 a.m., with the Shinano's propellers pounding hard in the ocean's silence, he decided to act. With a bold calculation, he changed the Archerfish's course, crossing ahead of the enemy's trajectory. It was like trying to predict a bullet's path to place his own cannon at the exact firing point, a move bordering on insanity. At 3:05 a.m., the submarine dove. The orders were clear, cold, direct. Periscope depth, 30 meters. Prepare the tubes. Set torpedo depth, 10 feet. The crew hesitated. 10 feet? That was too shallow. Any commander would have programmed to hit below the central waterline, where damage is deeper and theoretically lethal. But Enright wasn't just any commander. He remembered precisely what Admiral Freeland Dobbin had told him years before. If you're attacking an aircraft carrier, don't aim for the bottom. Aim just below the flight deck. If you hit there, the ship's own weight will help sink it. And there was another disturbing detail. The Mark 14 torpedoes had a history of failures and running deeper than programmed. If he set for standard depth, they might just pass under the target. This wasn't a miscalculation, it was experience, and Enright knew it. Tension inside the submarine reached its peak. Operators kept their eyes on the instruments. The air was thick, as if the ocean itself was pressing on everyone's lungs. The men knew what was about to happen. They were in position. They had the monster in sight, but they were alone. No other submarine nearby, no reinforcements. One mistake, and they'd be destroyed. One hit, and they'd enter history. If you've made it this far, you've already realized this story is bigger than a simple naval confrontation. Subscribe to the channel now to keep following real battles like this, where strategy, courage, and instinct define who survives. Here, history is told as it deserves, with tension, emotion, and respect. Aboard the Shinano, silence turned into an alert signal. The American radar pulses had vanished. Captain Abe felt the void. He knew what it meant. The enemy had dived. An attack was imminent. The only hope was the ship's size, its structure. But what Abe didn't know was that that submarine had studied more than he could predict, and now it was about to fire. On the Archerfish at 3:13 a.m., the enemy ship crossed the firing line. The distance was ideal, just under 3 kilometers. The tubes were aligned. The periscope rose for brief seconds. There it was, Japan's Colossus passing majestically through the sights of the small American predator. Enright didn't hesitate. Fire 1, Fire 2, Fire 3, Fire 4. Torpedoes were launched at 8-second intervals, slicing through the waters like silent blades. Then the submarine began to dive deeper. Enright gave the final order, take her to 400 feet, rig for attack, prepare for retaliation. Tension now mixed with the muffled sound of the hull compressing under the depths. The attack was done. But no one knew what had happened. No one could see if the torpedoes hit, if the enemy would react, or if that mission would also be the end of the Archerfish. And then, a boom. Then another. Lights flashing under the surface. Violent vibrations rippled through the sea. 2, maybe 3 impacts confirmed. But what came next? No one there was prepared to witness. Japan's largest aircraft carrier had been hit, but would that be enough to sink her? The answer comes now, and it involves the internal collapse of a giant that should never have set sail.
The first impact sounded like metallic thunder on the Shinano's hull. A flash briefly lit the black waves of the Pacific, followed by a second, even more violent boom. Down below, on the Archerfish, the vibrations coursed through the submarine's hull like a contained roar of victory. Captain Enright didn't celebrate. Not yet. He knew hitting was just the beginning. Sinking a ship of that magnitude was another story. There were still more torpedoes on the way, and the deadly silence of the ocean floor would be the final judge. Aboard the Shinano, chaos erupted like an invisible wave. The deck trembled. Compartments began to flood. Alarms sounded in sequence. Captain Toshio Abe, until then serene, immediately realized something was wrong, deeply wrong. An aircraft carrier of that size, theoretically, could withstand up to 8 torpedoes, but the ship he commanded wasn't theoretical. She was real, incomplete, poorly sealed, and now gravely wounded. The first explosions ripped open the starboard side hull. The first torpedo hit an empty fuel tank and the refrigeration plant, 2 compartments that filled with water in minutes. The second went straight to the starboard engine room, ripping out pipes, valves, and men all at once. The third exploded in fire compartment number 3, killing the entire team operating there. And the fourth destroyed the air compressor room, disabling the secondary damage control system. It was as if each torpedo had chosen the most vulnerable point possible. In theory, the ship should have resisted, but practice was different. The incomplete flooding containment systems couldn't isolate the affected compartments. The watertight doors that should have held the water simply weren't installed. To make matters worse, thousands of civilians, workers, and improvised soldiers ran disoriented through the corridors, not understanding the orders shouted in technical Japanese. It was like an anthill drowning from the inside. On the bridge, Captain Abe gripped the railing so tightly his fingers turned white. The ship had listed 13 degrees. That alone wouldn't be fatal, but it was a warning. Gravity was starting to work against him. Every minute, water accumulated in poorly designed points, unbalancing the ship from within. The idea of keeping the engines at full steam was an attempt to continue, to escape the danger zone. But, ironically, the engine's power helped pull even more water into the open wounds. The crew tried to fight fate. Manual pumps, improvised plugs, steel plates hastily welded amid the panic. But there was no competing with the ocean. The water's pressure swept men and materials like paper, and the problem only grew. By 4 a.m., less than an hour after the impacts, the Shinano already showed a list over 20 degrees. Every 5 minutes, another system failed. First, the auxiliary generators, then the water pumps. Next, the air compressors that powered the hydraulic doors, a slow, agonizing death for a ship that should never have been launched. In a last effort, the escort destroyers tried towing. Lines were thrown, sailors risked over agitated waves, but the sinking ship's force was greater than any mechanical traction. One by one, the lines snapped with violent cracks, whipping pieces of steel like deadly lashes across the deck. Still, Captain Abe refused to retreat. He ordered flooding the opposite side compartments in a desperate attempt to rebalance the vessel. And, for a brief moment, it worked. The list stopped. The ship stabilized at 19 degrees. There was a breath. The operators paused. The screams ceased. Maybe some thought the Shinano could be saved. But that illusion lasted little. At 8:30 a.m., the sea made its final move. One of the hydraulic compartments, already saturated and pressured, collapsed completely. The water broke through the internal bulkheads and advanced like a faceless monster through the corridors. One of the engineering lieutenants, about to be swallowed by the water, climbed to the hatch and, bidding farewell to the bridge, shouted through the voice tube, "I will go first. I will pray for the Shinano and her crew." From the other end, Captain Abe lowered his head. "Thank you." But even in the face of imminent destruction, bizarre and cold orders would still be given. And when the end finally came, it took with it much more than just steel. What happened in the Shinano's final hours exposes the cruelest side of war and the human soul under pressure. The sky was beginning to lighten on the horizon when the Shinano reached the point of no return. It was just after 9 a.m. The ship, once the ultimate symbol of Japanese naval power, now fought not to capsize. The hatches had given way, the systems were collapsing, and water swallowed entire compartments at an impossible speed to contain. The list exceeded 22 degrees. The men could no longer move in straight lines inside the ship. They slipped, clung to metalwork, desperately tried to maintain balance as the vessel tilted to her final side. By now, more than 1,000 sailors and civilian workers were clustered on the deck, staring at the horizon with empty eyes. Some had already jumped. Others, paralyzed by fear, just waited for an order that would never come. Captain Toshio Abe remained on the bridge, his face impassive, his gaze fixed on the sea. He didn't say abandon ship, he didn't shout desperate orders, he just murmured, almost in a whisper, "You are all relieved of duty. Save yourselves." It was enough. One by one, the men began to jump into the ocean, some with improvised life vests, others just in their clothes. Debris already floated around. Below, the propellers still turned slowly, enough to create dangerous whirlpools. Many were sucked under while trying to escape, others were thrown far by internal explosions. On the accompanying destroyers, the situation was equally desperate, but something even darker revealed itself. Captain Terauchi, commander of the Yukikaze, watched the tragedy from his ship's bridge. Seeing sailors thrashing in the water, he ordered something that froze his officers' spines. Do not rescue anyone who is screaming or crying for help. Those weak men are not fit for the Navy. Save only those who remain calm. The words fell like a death sentence. Rescue boats passed dozens of castaways and ignored them. Some soldiers closed their eyes. Others simply obeyed. In that moment, the code of honor overrode compassion. It was the exact portrait of an empire sinking along with its values. Inside the Shinano, the last compartments were taken by the water. The list passed 30 degrees. The base of the island, the ship's superstructure, already touched the waterline. At 10:55 a.m., with a final boom and a deep metallic groan, the largest aircraft carrier ever built rolled completely to her side and sank. Like an entire city being swallowed by the ocean, the Shinano disappeared under the waves. Compressed air explosions escaped from ruptured structures, hurling bodies and debris into the sky. Captain Abe, as promised, stayed aboard with his officers. None of them tried to flee, none were seen again. The ship took with her more than 1,400 lives, many of whom didn't even know why they were on that voyage. And what did Japan do with this tragedy? It silenced it. The loss of the Shinano was a deep blow to the morale of a navy already weakened, but instead of informing the population, the high command chose to hide everything. Survivors were taken to isolated facilities, far from the press and families. No ceremony, no public mention. The Shinano didn't exist, at least not officially. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, the USS Archerfish silently headed back to base. No damage, no lost torpedoes. The crew was in silent ecstasy. But when they arrived in Guam, the silence turned to skepticism. Operations Commander John Corbis pulled Enright aside. "Joe, I'm sorry, but naval intelligence doesn't confirm your mission. They say there was no aircraft carrier in Tokyo that day, so what exactly did you sink?" Enright was speechless. After all the risk, all the tension, the unbelievable feat, they were doubting him. He could have exploded, but he did something much more powerful. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. His sketch, a drawing made hastily during the pursuit. There, among crooked lines, was a detail that would change everything. The rounded bow, unique to the secret Japanese vessel. Here's what we saw. You may not believe it, but the ocean knows. And the ocean confirmed. What Enright had sunk wasn't just a ship, it was the final hope of an empire. And when the truth emerged, the U.S. Navy had to rewrite its records and recognize the war's most successful submarine mission. The paper, scribbled by Enright, sweaty and marked by time, circulated among senior officers in heavy silence. It was just a drawing.
But there, in those crude lines, was the key that dismantled American naval intelligence's skepticism. The curved bow outline, the colossal proportion between deck and hull, the imposing masts. Everything matched rumors captured by espionage. A giant, secret Japanese aircraft carrier that no one had ever confirmed existed. A few days later, intercepted Japanese transmissions spoke discreetly about a vessel lost en route to Kure. They didn't name it, didn't reveal numbers, but the details matched: the size, the date, the location. A data cross-check confirmed what Enright already knew. He had sunk the Shinano, the largest warship ever built up to that point. Official recognition came later, with a mix of pride and astonishment. Analysts calculated 59 to 72,000 tons sunk in a single attack. No other American submarine had done anything like it. The Archerfish's mission became recognized as the most successful patrol of World War II in terms of tonnage sunk. Joseph Enright received the Navy Cross, one of the U.S. Navy's highest honors. But perhaps more than the medal, what weighed heaviest on Enright's shoulders was something invisible: the confirmation that he had been right when no one believed him. He, who had been discredited, who resigned command after hesitating in the past, now had written his name in history with indelible ink. The man who felled a giant. In Japan, the loss of the Shinano remained buried under layers of silence. Records only came to light many years later. The ship, a symbol of Japan's naval supremacy resurgence, was an expensive mistake, built in haste, poorly finished, launched to sea by pure political pressure. Her internal flaws were as lethal as the torpedoes that hit her. It wasn't just a sinking, it was the collapse of an empire cloaked in pride and denial. And the Shinano became more than a lost ship. She became a lesson. Today, naval engineers, military historians, and strategists study every detail of her construction and fall. The haste in converting her, the underestimation of the enemy, the decision to sail unfinished, the failure of the most basic systems, the absence of tests. Each point reveals a greater truth. In war and in life, it's not enough to seem invincible. If the foundations are compromised, collapse is inevitable. On the other side, the Archerfish, with her simple and limited structure, proved that strategy, courage, and persistence can topple any adversary, even those that seem unattainable. And Joseph Enright, the discredited commander, became a symbol of the importance of learning from your own mistakes, insisting when no one believes, and acting with conviction when opportunity arises. Because sometimes it's not the size of the weapon, it's the courage of the one wielding it. The ocean kept the Shinano's wreckage for decades, silent, like a submerged tomb of an era gone by. But the waters also keep memories, and among them is the one from the night when a single submarine pursued a giant and won. If this story held you until here, you know how much it deserves to be told. Subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss other epic battles, forgotten feats, and lessons that time almost erased. Here you find living history, told like it's cinema. And if this was just one mission, imagine the next ones.